Time for tonight's last word. Last year, the governor of Alabama, Kay Ivey, signed an unconstitutional anti-abortion bill that was then blocked in federal court. And when she signed the bill, Governor Ivey tweeted a picture of herself saying, "Today I signed into law the Alabama Human Life Protection Act. To the bill's many supporters, this legislation stands as a powerful testament to Alabamians' deeply held belief that every life is precious and that every life is a sacred gift from God." She didn't really mean that, because the next day she killed a man. Michael Brandon Samra was executed the next day by lethal injection in Alabama, having been convicted of killing 4 people. Kay Ivey, who says every life is precious, refused to use her absolute power as governor to stop that execution. Hannah Cox is from Alabama and is a leader of an organization called Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty. She says that conservative support of the death penalty is, quote, a stance that cheapens the pro-life argument. She says it's a contradiction. Yesterday, Kay Ivey lived that contradiction once again. At 9:01 p.m., she took the life of Nathaniel Woods, who was not convicted of killing anyone. But because a jury found that he was present when Kerry Spencer murdered 3 police officers, Nathaniel Woods was sentenced to death, even though 2 of his 12 jurors did not vote for the death penalty. Alabama is the only state where a jury can deliver a death penalty without a unanimous verdict. Is that what Kay Ivey would call a powerful testament to Alabamians' deeply held belief that every life is precious and that every life is a gift, is a sacred gift from God? Governor Ivey issued a statement last night saying, "I concluded that the state of Alabama should carry out Mr. Woods' lawfully imposed sentence this evening." That written statement did not say every life is precious. That written statement did not say every life is a sacred gift from God. Governor Ivey has said in the past that she doesn't like this part of her job. She has said that she did not, quote, relish the responsibility that I hold. But she has held that responsibility while sending 9 men to their deaths in her 3 years as governor. Now, I don't know how religious Kay Ivey really is, but I don't believe that she is more religious than the Pope, who really does believe that every life is precious. And when Pope Francis says every life, he means every life, including people who spend their lives in prison. The Vatican is less than 2 miles from Regina Coeli prison. Pope Francis visited that prison 2 years ago when he was 81 years old. He was not the first pope to visit that prison. Pope John the 23rd visited Regina Coeli in 1958. Pope Paul VI visited in 1964. And Pope John Paul II visited the prison in 2000. 4 popes have visited that prison because they all truly believe that every life is precious. When Pope Francis visited the prison, he washed the feet of 12 prisoners, symbolically reenacting Jesus Christ washing the feet of his 12 disciples. Pope Francis told the prisoners, Jesus does not know how to wash his hands of us. He never abandons us. Pope Francis actually lives the words that Kay Ivey put in her tweet about Alabamians' deeply held belief that every life is precious and that every life is a sacred gift from God. That day at Regina Coeli, Pope Francis told the prisoners, there is no just penalty that is not open to hope. That is why the death penalty is neither Christian nor human.